My heart isn't beating. It's slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. The air in this foyer tastes like expensive candles and rot. I'm standing 3 feet away from a man I've shared a bed with for 12 years, and I've never felt more like a ghost. He's looking at his phone, smiling at a screen, while I disappear into the wallpaper. I need to burn this house down. Not with fire, but with the truth of what he's turned me into. I am starving for a version of myself that he hasn't touched yet. Mark didn't look up when Elena crossed the kitchen. The marble floor was cold beneath her bare feet. He was scrolling, his thumb moving with a rhythmic aggression. He looked like the man she loved. Broad shoulders, expensive linen shirt, the sharp jawline, but he was a hollowed-out version of that memory. The scent of his cologne, something woody and sharp, filled the space between them. It used to ground her. Now it made her skin crawl. She reached for the kettle, her hand trembling just enough to make the metal lid rattle. "Late meeting again tomorrow?" Elena asked. Her voice was thin, a wire stretched to the breaking point. She watched his reflection in the stainless steel of the refrigerator. He didn't blink. He didn't even pause his scrolling. The silence stretched until it became a physical weight in the room. I can feel the scream building in my throat, a hot, jagged thing. He finally looked up, his eyes vacant, offering a practiced, patronizing smile that didn't reach his brow. "Client dinner, Elle. You know how it is. The merger is entering the final phase," Mark said. He set the phone face down on the counter, but not before a notification chirped. A flash of pink on the screen. Elena knew that color. It was the avatar for Sarah, his 24-year-old creative lead. Mark stood up, smoothing his shirt. He walked over and kissed Elena's forehead. It was a clinical gesture, devoid of heat. He tasted like peppermint and betrayal. Elena waited until the sound of his footsteps faded up the stairs. She didn't cry. The time for crying had ended 3 weeks ago when she found the receipts for the Cartier bracelet in his glove box, a bracelet she didn't own. She pulled her own laptop from the hidden charging station beneath the mail pile. Her fingers flew across the keys. She wasn't looking for divorce lawyers anymore. She had already seen the prenup. Section 8. Paragraph 4. Infidelity by either party results in a total forfeiture of the marital estate. She needed to feel powerful before she felt poor. The website was understated. Deep blacks in gold accents. The Sovereign Collection. It didn't look like a tawdry escort service. It looked like a concierge for the elite. She scrolled through the profiles. Men who looked like architects, athletes, and poets. Then she saw him. Julian. He had eyes that looked like they could see through a person's skin. There was no arrogance in his headshot, just a terrifyingly calm presence. She clicked book for the following evening. The deposit was $3,000. "I'm buying back my soul, 1 hour at a time." The next morning was a blur of mechanical motions. Elena went to the gym. She sat in the sauna until her lungs burned. She watched the other women and wondered which of them were also living in houses built of glass and lies. She felt a strange, cold electricity humming in her veins. She wasn't a victim today. She was a client. She went to a high-end boutique and bought a dress that cost more than Mark's monthly car payment. It was silk, the color of a bruised plum. By 7 p.m., she was standing in the lobby of the Grand Meridian. The air was thick with the smell of floor wax and old money. She checked her reflection in a gilded mirror. The dress clung to her, a second skin. She looked like a woman who was loved. She looked like a woman who was dangerous. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from an unknown number. Suite 402. The door is unlocked. Drink is poured. Her heart did that frantic bird kick again. "I can't do this. I have to do this." Elena pushed open the heavy mahogany door to Suite 402. The room was bathed in the amber glow of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. A man stood by the window, his back to her. He was taller than Mark, with a presence that seemed to pull the oxygen out of the room. He turned slowly, holding a crystal glass of amber liquid. Julian. He didn't smile, but his gaze was an anchor. He looked at her not as a transaction, but as a person. The air between them felt pressurized, heavy with the weight of the night to come. The silence in the suite is thick, like honey and lead. I expected to feel cheap, a woman buying a moment of manufactured dignity, but standing under his gaze, the shame won't take root. Instead, there is a terrifying clarity. I am paying for him to see me, and for the first time in a decade, someone is actually looking. My breath catches in my throat, not from fear, but from the sudden, violent realization that I have been invisible for so long, I'd forgotten I had a shape. Julian moved with a predatory grace, crossing the plush carpet without making a sound. He didn't reach for her immediately. Instead, he stopped just outside her personal space, the scent of sandalwood and something metallic like rain on pavement clinging to him. He took the clutch from her trembling fingers and set it on the sideboard. His eyes never left hers. They weren't the eyes of a salesman. They were deep, observant, and disturbingly calm. He reached out, his thumb grazing the line of her jaw with a touch so light it felt like a breeze. "You're shaking, Elena," he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth as polished stone. He didn't ask why. He didn't offer a platitude. He simply acknowledged the physical truth of her. Elena tried to swallow, but her throat was a desert. The heat from his hand seemed to radiate through her entire face. "Stop it. You're paying for this. Control the narrative." I want to tell him I'm not a victim, but the way he holds my gaze makes the lie crumble before I can even form the words. He led her to the small dining table near the window. 2 plates of seared ahi tuna sat untouched, looking like art pieces. He poured a vintage Bordeaux, the liquid dark as a bruise in the candlelight. Julian didn't talk about himself. He asked her about the last time she felt light, not happy light. Elena found herself talking about a summer in Italy before she met Mark, before the house, before the silence. Julian listened with an intensity that felt more intimate than a touch. As the night progressed, the artifice of the arrangement began to blur. Julian was a master of the craft. He knew exactly when to lean in, when to let a silence breathe, and when to challenge her. He made her feel like the only person in the world, a stark contrast to Mark's dismissive grunts and constant phone glow. They finished the wine, the city lights below them shimmering like spilled diamonds. Elena felt a strange, intoxicating power. She was the one in charge here. She was the one writing the check. "He doesn't deserve the version of you that sits in that house," Julian said suddenly. He was standing behind her chair now, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. The weight of them felt grounding, a physical anchor in the swirling storm of her emotions. Elena closed her eyes, leaning her head back against his stomach. She could hear his heartbeat steady, rhythmic, unbothered. It was the heart of a man who knew exactly who he was. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. The one night was technically half over, but the physical boundary remained. Julian hadn't pushed for more, and Elena hadn't asked. The conversation had done more to repair her ego than any physical act could. He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "You should go home soon," he whispered. "Carry this feeling with you. Don't let him take it back when you walk through that front door." Elena stood up, her legs feeling like jelly. She felt transformed, a butterfly emerging from a cocoon of resentment. She reached into her purse and pulled out the remaining balance in cash, tucked into a crisp envelope. Julian took it without looking at it, sliding it into his jacket pocket. He walked her to the door, his hand resting on the small of her back. The hallway of the hotel felt colder, more sterile than the cocoon of the suite they were leaving behind. At the elevator, Julian stopped. He turned her to face him one last time. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up, his expression shifting into something sharper, almost triumphant. "One last thing for the road, Elena," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "When you get home, tell your husband you've been getting some good D." He let go and stepped back into the shadows of the room as the elevator doors hissed open. Elena stood frozen, the words echoing in her skull like a bell. "I feel a wicked surge of adrenaline." Those words are a weapon, and I can't wait to see the look on Mark's face when I fire them. The steering wheel feels like ice under my palms. My skin is buzzing, a frantic, electric hum that makes me want to scream and laugh at the same time. I am a different woman than the one who left this driveway 4 hours ago. I have a secret now, a jagged piece of glass tucked under my tongue, and I'm going to use it to cut the smug look right off Mark's face. The porch light is on, casting a long yellow finger across the lawn. He's in there. He's waiting for the woman he thinks he can ignore. He has no idea the ghost is finally haunting back. Elena pulled the SUV into the garage, the engine's kill switch plunging the space into a sudden, ringing silence. She sat for a moment, watching the dust motes dance in the dying light of the headlights. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick bitten off, and her eyes had a predatory shine she hadn't seen in years. She smoothed the plum silk of her dress, the fabric rustling like a warning. She stepped out, the click of her heels on the concrete sounding like a countdown. The mudroom door creaked as she entered. Usually, she'd slip her shoes off and sneak upstairs to avoid a confrontation, but tonight she wanted the noise. She wanted the confrontation. She walked into the kitchen, the scent of Julian's cologne still clinging to her neck. Mark was exactly where she expected him to be. The living room recliner, the glow of the television flickering against his face. He didn't turn around. "You're late," he said, his voice flat, bored. "He doesn't even care where I've been. I am a piece of furniture to him." "I was out," Elena said. She walked to the bar cart and poured herself a glass of water, her movements deliberate. She didn't look at him. She waited for the follow-up question. The spark of jealousy, or even just a flicker of curiosity. Mark shifted in his chair, his eyes fixed on a mindless action movie. "Dinner's in the fridge if you're hungry," he muttered. The dismissiveness was a slap. It was the fuel she needed to light the fuse Julian had handed her. Elena walked into the living room and stood directly between Mark and the television. He finally looked up, his brow furrowing in annoyance. He took in the dress, the expensive heels, and the way she was breathing fast and shallow. "What are you doing, Elle? Move!" He reached for the remote, but she didn't budge. She felt the weight of Julian's parting words sitting in her mouth, heavy and lethal. She was tired of the Cold War. It was time for a scorched earth policy. "I'm not hungry for leftovers, Mark," she said, her voice steadying. She saw his eyes narrow, a flash of genuine confusion breaking through his mask of indifference. He looked her up and down, finally noticing the intensity radiating from her. For the first time in months, he wasn't looking at his phone, he was looking at her. The air in the room felt thin, charged with the static of an impending storm. She could see the veins in his neck begin to tighten. "What's with the dress?" Mark asked, his voice losing its bored edge. "You go to a gala I didn't know about?" He let out a short, dry laugh that sounded like snapping twigs. He stood up, towering over her, trying to regain the height advantage. He smelled like the office and stagnant ambition. Elena didn't flinch. She leaned in, just close enough for him to catch the scent of Julian on her skin, that metallic rain and sandalwood. Mark's nostrils flared. He recognized the scent wasn't hers. His expression shifted from annoyance to a dark, simmering suspicion. "You've been drinking," he accused, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Who were you with?" The question she had waited years to hear finally arrived, but it felt hollow. It didn't matter who she was with. What mattered was the power she held in this moment. "I have the detonator. I just have to press it." Elena smiled, a slow, cruel curve of her lips. She thought of Julian's face in the doorway, the way he had commanded her to speak. She leaned toward Mark's ear, mimicking the intimacy Julian had shown her, and whispered the line with venomous precision. "Since you're so curious, tell your husband you've been getting some good D." She pulled back, watching the blood drain from Mark's face. He looked like he'd been struck. The look on his face is worth every cent. "I finally broke him, and God, it feels better than I ever imagined." The silence that follows is deafening, a high-pitched ring that vibrates in my molars. I expected him to yell. I expected him to throw something, to break a glass, to demand a name. But he's just standing there, his face transitioning from shock into something I can't quite read. It's a stillness that feels heavy, like the air right before a tornado touches down. I've pierced the bubble. I've drawn blood. So why does it feel like I'm the one bleeding out in the middle of this expensive rug? Mark didn't explode. He didn't even raise his voice. He took a single step back and sat back down in the recliner, his movements slow and mechanical. He stared at the blank television screen for a long beat, his fingers interlacing over his stomach. The rage she had seen a second ago had been replaced by a terrifying, clinical calm. He looked like a man who had just solved a complex mathematical equation and found the answer exactly where he expected it to be. "Is that right?" Mark asked. He finally turned his head to look at her, but his eyes were different. The vacancy was gone, replaced by a sharp, calculating focus that made Elena's stomach turn. He didn't look like a jealous husband. He looked like an auditor. "Some good D." That's a very specific phrase for you to use, Elena. Very. Modern. He's not screaming. Why isn't he screaming? I feel the first cold drip of dread slide down my spine, a silent warning I don't want to hear. Elena crossed her arms, trying to shield herself from his gaze. "Does it matter how I say it? You've been doing whatever you want with Sarah for months. I just decided to stop waiting for you to come home." She tried to inject the venom back into her tone, but it felt diluted. She walked toward the stairs, desperate to end the scene while she still had the upper hand. She needed the safety of the bedroom, the sanctuary of a locked door. "You're right, Elle. It doesn't matter how you say it," Mark called out after her. His voice carried across the open-plan living room, hitting her like a physical weight. "What matters is that you did it. You actually went through with it. You sought it out." Elena stopped on the third step, her hand gripping the mahogany banister until her knuckles turned white. There was a note of satisfaction in his voice, a dark, triumphant resonance that shouldn't be there. She turned around, looking down at him from the stairs. "What are you talking about?" "I'm leaving you, Mark. I'm filing tomorrow. You cheated first. You're the one who broke this marriage." Mark stood up again, but this time he didn't approach her. He walked over to the kitchen island and picked up his phone, tapping the screen with a slow, deliberate rhythm. He looked up at her and smiled, a thin, razor-sharp expression that made her knees feel weak. "We'll see what the judge thinks about who broke what," Mark said quietly. He walked toward the stairs, stopping at the bottom. He looked up at her, his eyes scanning her face as if he were memorizing her features for a report. The scent of Julian's cologne was still there, but now it felt like a brand, a mark of shame instead of a badge of courage. "You should probably get some sleep, Elena. You've had a very expensive night." Elena retreated to the master bedroom, locking the door behind her. She collapsed against the wood, her breath coming in jagged, ragged bursts. Her mind was racing, replaying the night in the hotel. Julian's words. The way he had looked at her. The way he had pushed her to say that exact phrase to Mark. "Tell your husband." It felt less like a gift now and more like a set of instructions. She looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror, the plum silk dress now looking like a funeral shroud. She reached for her phone to call Julian, to tell him she had done it, to seek some kind of validation or comfort. But when she opened the website for the Sovereign Collection, the page wouldn't load. "Error 404, page not found." She tried the direct number from the text message. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." The room began to spin. The silence of the house felt predatory, as if the walls themselves were watching her. He was too perfect. Every word, every touch, every look. It was all too perfect. "I think I just stepped into a trap I built for myself. The sun is a violent intrusion. It bleeds through the cracks in the blackout curtains, stinging my eyes and forcing me back into a reality I spent the last 6 hours trying to sleep away. My mouth tastes like copper in stale wine. Every muscle in my body is stiff, as if I've been braced for a car crash that never quite happened. But the crash did happen. I can feel the wreckage of my life scattered across the floor of this bedroom. I am terrified to move, because the moment I do, the gravity of what I've done or what's been done to me will finally break my bones." Elena sat up slowly, her head throbbing. The plum silk dress was a wrinkled mess on the floor, discarded in a fit of midnight panic. She pulled on a thick wool robe, tying the sash so tight it bruised her waist. The house was unnervingly quiet. No sound of the coffee maker, no shower running, no muffled news anchors on the television. She walked to the window and peered through the slats. Mark's car was gone. The driveway was a barren stretch of gray concrete. She descended the stairs, her hand trailing lightly on the banister. The kitchen was pristine. The glass of water she'd poured the night before was still on the counter, a ring of condensation marking the marble. There was an envelope sitting exactly where Mark's phone had been. It was heavy, high-bond paper, the kind used for legal documents. Her name was written on the front in Mark's precise architectural script. I don't want to open it. I want to burn it, but my hands are already moving, tearing the seal with a desperate, frantic energy. The first thing she saw wasn't text. It was a photograph. It was a high-resolution, grainy shot of her in the hotel hallway, Julian's hand on her lower back. The angle was perfect. It looked intimate, illicit. She flipped to the next page. A transcript. 12:04 a.m. Subject states, "Tell your husband you've been getting some good D." The words looked hideous in black and white, stripped of the bravado she'd felt when she spoke them. Beneath the photos was a letter from a law firm she recognized, Sterling and Associates. They were the most aggressive matrimonial litigators in the city. The letter was brief. It cited Section 8 of their prenuptial agreement. It stated that due to irrefutable evidence of moral turpitude and documented infidelity, the dissolution of marriage proceedings had been initiated. It informed her that the locks on the house would be changed by noon. Elena felt the floor tilt. She grabbed the edge of the island to keep from collapsing. This wasn't just a divorce, it was an execution. Mark hadn't just caught her, he had manufactured the crime. The sovereign collection, the mysterious text, the perfectly timed good D line, it was all a setup. Julian wasn't an escort, he was a weapon. I am a fool. A colossal, arrogant fool who thought she was playing the hunter when she was just a tethered goat. She grabbed her phone, her fingers slick with sweat. She called her best friend Maya, a corporate lawyer who knew the inner workings of Mark's social circle. The call went to voicemail 3 times before Maya finally picked up. Her voice was guarded, stripped of its usual warmth. "Elena, I can't really talk to you right now. Mark's lawyer called my firm this morning. They've flagged me as a potential witness. I'm so sorry." The line went dead. Elena ran to the front door, looking for the spare key she kept hidden in a ceramic planter. It was gone. She looked at the street and saw a black sedan idling at the curb. A man sat in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses, watching the house. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like Julian. Same posture, same chilling stillness. She realized then that she wasn't just being sued, she was being watched. Every move she made was being added to the file. She retreated to the living room, sinking onto the sofa. The television was still on from the night before, muted. A news crawl moved across the bottom of the screen, but she couldn't focus on the words. She looked at the good D transcript again. The phrasing was so specific, so out of character for her. Mark had known exactly how to provoke her into saying it. He had studied her for 12 years just to learn how to destroy her in one night. He didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to erase me, and I gave him the pen to do it. My mind is a shattered window, sharp fragments of memory cutting into my sanity every time I try to breathe. I keep seeing the way Julian looked at me in the suite that focused. Artificial empathy. It was a performance. Every meaningful glance, every lingering touch was a line of code in a program designed to delete my future. I'm not just losing my house. I'm losing the truth of my own life. I need to find him. I need to see the man behind the mask, even if looking at him burns my eyes out. Elena scrambled to her feet, the legal papers fluttering to the floor like dead leaves. She grabbed her laptop and a bottle of water, retreating to the small guest bedroom, the only room Mark rarely entered. She needed to trace the digital ghost of Julian. She bypassed the 404 error on the Sovereign Collection site, using a cached version of the page. Her fingers moved with a frantic, desperate speed. She looked for the metadata in the images, any digital footprint that the concierge service might have left behind in their haste to vanish. After 40 minutes of dead ends, she found a lead. The text message she received at the hotel hadn't come from a burner. It had been routed through a private server belonging to a firm called Apex Risk Management. She typed the name into a search engine. The results weren't for an escort service. They were for a high-stakes investigative firm specializing in corporate espionage and domestic litigation. I can feel the nausea rising, a cold, oily wave in my gut. They don't sell companionship, they sell ruin. She found a physical address for Apex, a nondescript office park on the industrial edge of the city. She didn't change out of her robe. She threw a trench coat over it, shoved her feet into loafers, and grabbed her keys. She had to see it. She had to know if Julian was just a name on a payroll. As she backed her car out of the garage, she noticed the black sedan at the curb didn't follow her. The man in the sunglasses just watched her go, a predator who knew the prey had nowhere left to run. The drive was a blur of red lights and near misses. The office park was a cluster of gray glass and brutalist concrete. She found Suite 210. There was no gold lettering, no sovereign branding, just a small brushed steel plaque that read ARM Investigations. Elena pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby was sterile, smelling of ozone and industrial cleaner. A receptionist with a headset looked up, her expression as flat and unwelcoming as the walls. "I'm here to see Julian," Elena said, her voice cracking. The receptionist didn't blink. "There is no one here by that name, ma'am. Do you have an appointment with an investigator?" Elena leaned over the desk, her reflection in the glass partition looking haggard and broken. "The man who worked the Meridian last night? The man who set me up?" The receptionist's eyes flickered a brief, microscopic tell of recognition before they went cold again. A door behind the desk opened. A man walked out, carrying a stack of files. He wasn't wearing the charcoal suit. He was in a tactical polo and khakis, a lanyard around his neck. The jawline, the eyes, the way he occupied space. But the Julian, she knew the poet, the listener, was gone. This man looked at her with the professional boredom of a butcher looking at a side of beef. He didn't stop. He didn't apologize. He simply walked past her toward the break room. "Julian!" she screamed. He stopped, turning slowly. He didn't smile. "My name is Elias, Mrs. Vance," he said. The voice was the same, but the warmth had been surgically removed. "And I believe our business concluded at midnight. If you have concerns regarding the evidence gathered, I suggest you contact your legal counsel." He looked at her robe peeking out from under her coat and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "You really shouldn't have come here." Elena reached out to slap him, but he caught her wrist with a speed that was terrifying. He didn't squeeze, but the strength in his grip was absolute. He leaned in, and for a second, it felt like the hotel room again, but the words were different. "It's just a job, Elena. Mark paid for the best. I gave him the best." He let go of her arm and walked away, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Elena stood in the center of the lobby, the silence of the office ringing in her ears. I am nothing to him. I was a target, a line item on an invoice. I didn't find an escort. I found my own executioner. The air in this conference room is recycled and dead, smelling of expensive toner and cold ambition. I'm sitting across from the man I thought I knew, and all I see is a stranger with a spreadsheet where his heart should be. My lawyer is whispering something about damage control, but the words are just white noise. I keep looking at the manila folder on the mahogany table. It's thin, but it contains enough weight to crush me. I want to reach across the table and rip the smug look off Mark's face. Wants to sound, but I'm paralyzed by the realization that I've already played my last card, and it was a joker. Mark sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the table. He looked refreshed, his suit crisp, his hair groomed to perfection. To his right sat a shark-faced woman in a pinstripe blazer, his lead counsel. Elena's own lawyer, a weary man named Harrison, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The tension in the room was a physical pressure, a localized gravity that made it hard to draw a full breath. On the wall, a digital clock blinked with a rhythmic, mocking red pulse. "Let's keep this civilized," Mark's lawyer began, sliding a document across the polished wood. "The evidence of the incident at the Grand Meridian is indisputable. We have the logs, the audio, and the visual confirmation of the encounter. Per the prenuptial agreement, my client is seeking full possession of the primary residence, the vacation properties, and a total waiver of any alimony claims. I feel like I'm watching a movie of my own life, and the ending is being rewritten in real time by a woman who doesn't even know my middle name." Elena didn't look at the paper. She kept her eyes locked on Mark. "You hired him," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You spent thousands of dollars to trick your own wife into a room so you could record her. Does that feel like a win to you, Mark? Does it feel like justice?" Mark didn't blink. He leaned forward slightly, the light catching the gold of his watch, a gift she had bought him for their 10th anniversary. "I didn't trick you into that room, Elena," Mark said, his voice a low, dangerous purr. "I provided an opportunity. You chose to walk through the door. You chose to stay. And you chose to say those words to me when you came home." He tilted his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You wanted to hurt me? You were so desperate to see me bleed that you didn't notice the floor was covered in gasoline." Harrison cleared his throat, tapping a pen against his legal pad. "We are prepared to argue entrapment. The sovereign collection was a front. The investigator, Elias Thorne, acted as a provocateur." Mark's lawyer let out a short, sharp laugh. "Entrapment is a criminal defense, Mr. Harrison. This is civil court. Your client signed a contract. She breached it. Everything else is just theater." The word felt like a death sentence. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a small, digital recorder. She set it on the table. Mark's eyes flickered to the device, a momentary crack in his armor. "I went to Apex," she lied, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm. "I talked to Elias. He's not as loyal as you think he is, Mark. He told me everything. He told me how you coached him, how you gave him a script. It was a bluff, a desperate, pathetic reach into the dark, but she needed to see him sweat." Mark's lawyer reached for the recorder, but Mark held up a hand to stop her. He stared at Elena for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was genuine, filled with a terrifying sort of pity. "Elias Thorne is the best in the business for a reason, El. He doesn't flip. And even if he did, it wouldn't matter. The recording he made of you is what the judge will see, not the man behind the camera." Elena felt the last of her strength drain away. The recorder on the table looked like a toy. She realized then that Mark hadn't just planned for her infidelity, he had planned for her reaction to being caught. He had accounted for her anger, her desperation, and her pride. He was 3 steps ahead, and the path he'd led her down ended at a cliff. She looked at the settlement papers again, the signature line waiting like a hungry mouth. He's winning. He's taking the house, the money, and my dignity, and he's doing it with a smile. I have to find a way to break the script before I vanish completely. The ink on the page looks like a row of black teeth ready to snap shut. I can feel Mark's gaze, a physical weight on the top of my head, waiting for the moment I surrender. He thinks he's won because he owns the recording, the house, and the narrative. But there is a humming in my brain, a tiny, nagging discrepancy from the hotel room that doesn't fit his perfect script. I am drowning, but I've just felt something solid beneath my feet. If I'm going down, I'm taking his masterpiece with me. Elena lowered the pen, the tip hovering millimeters from the paper. She didn't sign. Instead, she closed her eyes, mentally replaying the final moments in Suite 402. She remembered the weight of Julian's no, Elias's hand on her chin. She remembered the coldness in his eyes. But most importantly, she remembered the sound of the door clicking shut before the elevator hissed open. She looked up at Mark, her eyes narrowing as a new, sharper realization cut through her fog of despair. "You said Elias is the best," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper that commanded the room's silence. Mark leaned back, his confidence unshakable. The absolute best, Elle. Worth every penny of the retainer. Elena smiled, and for the first time that morning, it wasn't a mask of pain. It was a genuine, jagged spark of malice. If he's the best, Mark, why did he leave the Sovereign Collection server logs active for 3 minutes after I contacted him this morning? Mark's lawyer paused, her hand hovering over a file. Mark's brow furrowed, a hairline fracture in his composure. Elena continued, the words spilling out with a new, terrifying velocity. I didn't just find his name, Mark. I found the invoice. The one you paid from the joint business account. The one that specifically requested instructional coaching and fabricated scenarios for litigation. You didn't just hire a PI to watch me. You hired a consultant to help you commit fraud. That's nonsense, Mark's lawyer snapped, though her eyes darted toward Mark. Elena ignored her. She leaned across the table, staring directly into her husband's soul. Section 12, Mark. The good faith clause of our prenup. If either party attempts to manipulate or manufacture evidence to trigger an infidelity clause, the entire agreement is null and void, and the offending party forfeits their share. I see it now, the twitch in his left eyelid. I've found the loose thread, and I'm going to pull until he's naked. Elena pulled her phone out again. She wasn't bluffing this time. She opened a PDF, not a recording, but a bank statement she'd pulled while hiding in the guest room. She slid it across the table. It showed a $15,000 wire transfer to Apex Risk Management, dated 2 weeks before she ever looked at that website. You didn't wait for me to cheat, Mark. You paid a man to build the room, buy the wine, and give me the script. That's not a honey trap. That's a conspiracy. The room erupted into a low-volume, high-intensity argument between the lawyers. Mark sat frozen, his eyes fixed on the bank statement. The ultimate gaslight had backfired. He had been so arrogant, so certain of Elena's brokenness, that he hadn't covered the most basic paper trail. He had used their shared wealth to fund her destruction, and in doing so, he had handed her the keys to his own kingdom. The hunter was suddenly staring at the bars of a cage. Elena stood up, smoothing her skirt. She didn't feel broken anymore. She felt cold, clean, and dangerously light. She looked at the settlement papers and ripped them in half, the sound of the tearing parchment like a gunshot in the quiet room. I'm not signing that, Mark. We're going to trial, and I'm going to make sure the judge sees the video Elias took. Not for the good D line, but for the part where your escort tells me exactly what you told him to say. She walked toward the door, stopping only to look back at the man she had loved for a decade. He looked small now, a gray man in a gray room. She felt a final, stinging moment of realization. It was never about love or betrayal for him. It was just a ledger. By the way, Mark, she said, her voice echoing in the hallway. The good D line? It was a bit much. You always did have terrible taste in scripts. She turned and walked away, the click of her heels a rhythmic victory march. He thought he could write my ending. He forgot that I'm the one who holds the pen. Pleasure doing business with you, Mark.